A long time ago, the highest echelons of this world spoke about the traces left behind by the Demon King and the great forest that is shrouded in demonic energy. From here, his tragic destiny changed, and 10 years later, that same boy had grown up and was now hunting a rabbit. But the hunt was not easy. Even with the Seed of Darkness, because a human capable of weakening the barrier should be able to pass through, but the old man didn't know exactly where, since he had never tried to look for her. However, someone else had, the village chief, Irugo, that same bald man with the cape, from the human farm. And eventually, Helmut would experience countless things in the human world, but tragedy always arrives silently. When that day arrived, he would feel despair, perhaps even reaching the depths of darkness, but under no circumstances should he lose himself. That was all he asked of him. If he had nothing more to say, the old man would go take a nap, but he needed to return in the morning because he had something for Helmut. That night, he met Elga and was pensive, because he was finally going to leave that place, but it was a complicated feeling. The Aga, he simply said that it was proof that he was slowly becoming human. So, the next morning, he arrived at the cabin, but when he opened the door, the old man was sitting there, doing nothing, with a sword and a bag in front of him. Seeing him, Helmut clearly felt that it was time to leave, which is why he would remember Darien, his master, forever. Stepping outside, Darien told him that his time was coming to an end, and that he shouldn't make that face because Darien had lived and died as he wanted. Besides, it was time for Helmut to give Darien something, because he had it with him when Then he jumped on top of it and finally managed to catch the animal, telling Alaga that he had gotten his prey. And this Alaga is the panther that he was left there, and perhaps he would need it. A medallion made of pure gold. Inside was engraved, "May there be light on your path, Margaret Irene," and probably belonged to his family in the human world. And as he headed toward the farm, the Aga explained that the snake was hibernating and wouldn't wake unless there was a great shock. But if the Aga entered its territory, it would sense him. That's why he had to go alone, as it was his only chance. Thus, Helmut left, telling Alaga to take care and not die. At the human farm, when the boss turned off the light to sleep, Helmut appeared with his sword at his neck, ordering him not to move. Then, he explained that the magic of darkness was an evil power capable of making even a weak wizard strong. Among the various mages, there were those who crossed forbidden boundaries to gain power, and Irugo was one of them. He always envied others and dreamed, with the goal of becoming the strongest. Thus, he chose to become a dark wizard, and, through illegal activities involving humans, he obtained the necessary materials. The suffering and fear of others made Irubo increasingly powerful, but due to the pursuit of a certain mage, his atrocities were exposed, and sentenced to death or exile. To avoid death, he chose the root forest, where he eventually encountered the two-headed serpent. There, he obtained permission to remain in their territory in exchange for carrying out their mission and providing sacrifices. He used magic to gather exiled humans, forcing them to submit to, picked up that day, 10 years ago. She approached, tapping the animal with her paw, asking if Helmut had gotten used to hunting yet. Even though for now. This is how the human farm was established. Erubo became the king of the farm, while the other humans were treated like livestock. Now, never. It interfered with his work, but only as long as he continued to offer sacrifices. As he followed the snake's guidance, he once again became ambitious. But every winter, when now hibernated, demonic beasts would attack the farm on a daily basis. Even amidst those crises, he still found satisfaction in that life, until, now, with a sword at his neck, Helmut asked him what he wanted. What Helmut wanted to know was the way to escape the Forest of Roots. The bald man only asked if he was a disciple of Darien, but that didn't matter, and if he didn't speak, he was finished. He even tried to warn Helmut that if he died, Nao would awaken from hibernation, but Helmut would also die if that happened, because Nao could not revive the dead. He claimed that he was the only person who knew how. Get out of there, emphasizing that if they died, there would be no way to return. But the clever Helmut already knew that wizards were good at recording things, so if he died, it would be enough to check his house, and he would find something. Finally, the bald man said that he would explain how to escape the forest. He descended some stairs into the underground area, while he explained that the method he had discovered was only theoretical, because no one had ever attempted it, nor did anyone possess the necessary skills to do so. The only person who might be able to achieve it would be Darien, and the fact that Helmut was there meant that the old man had no intention of leaving that place, or he was already dead. Then he could only hunt rabbits. Then she ordered him to look at it carefully, because that thing is known as a core, and it is something that all demonic beasts. A book. But before handing it over, he invited Helmut to become his successor and live there, reasoning that as a disciple of Dien, he must be strong, different from the others. But anyway, Helmut only wanted the book so he could escape the forest. The bald man explained that he had found the book in a wizard's hideout before he lived there. According to the book, there was a huge waterfall on the southern border of that forest, a place where water and demonic power awakened divine power simultaneously. Thus, one might be able to break through the barrier at that location. But of course, even if it was weakened, it was still a high-level divine barrier, and anyone who failed would have their body reduced to ashes. That was all the bald man knew. And, even though he didn't, like him, Helmut remembered that Darien had said that lives should not be treated as insignificant. That's why Helmut struck him on the head. He punched him in the stomach, tied him to a pillar, and left him there, saying he would be released after a while. The old man started screaming because his magic wasn't working, but Helmut simply left, saying that he would abandon that forest. However, not satisfied with the beating, the old man used some strange magic to summon Missus Now. Thus, the snake woke up from its hibernation, asking why she had been summoned. The bald man said it was an urgent matter. Ari had died, and his disciple was there. The snake was happy, because this was finally his chance to get revenge. While Helmut was running through the forest, he ran into a company of possess. If you eat it, you will become stronger, and it will also increase your lifespan. Helmut, being no fool, said that the prey was his, so he had to. The demonic beasts led by Now. Feeling that pressure, he saw that his only option was to flee, until he perceived demonic energy all around him up ahead. Place. Just then, Now appeared, declaring that she had waited so long for this moment and couldn't let it pass her by. For Helmut, in that case, the only option, it remained to pass over his dead body. So, Now launched an attack, but Helmut dodged it amidst the rising dust. He couldn't see anything until the snake surrounded him with its body. Helmut paused to think calmly because his opponent was strong, but he wouldn't let things end on her terms. Now began to gather power in her mouth and launched it at him. In that instant, Helmut seized the opening to launch himself towards her mouth, but she counterattacked with her tail. Even so, he kept running along the tail because no matter how strong Nao was, she had a weak point that he could attack, using Viz. Then, while she was distracted, he launched a direct slash at the snake's eye. It was time to escape, or the situation would become even more complicated. But at that moment, Nao bit her own head and charged towards Helmut, their powers colliding. When the explosion occurred, Helmut had already fled without her even noticing. Sometime later, Helmut was exhausted, hiding in the forest and thinking that the snake was truly very strong, and just as he was leaving, she reappeared behind him because he couldn't hide within her forest. Then, as she lunged at him with her gaping mouth, the Aga appeared to eat it. But wait, hold on, because he couldn't, since that only works for demonic beasts, and if he ate it, he would transform into one, and would have to confront Now. She told him to leave that place because they were about to fight, and that was why he needed to seek his freedom. And with that, Helmut left. While the two were already locked in a fierce stare-down, Ilaga declared that she wasn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, Helmut, having finally managed to traverse Ilaga's territory, had been running for 2 days straight, leaving him with only one chance. He absolutely had to escape that forest with their help. And this place right here in front of the waterfall is significantly different because the demonic energy is almost undetectable. Just then, feathers started to fall from the sky as a giant bird descended, demanding to know what business he had in her territory. This was Igre, the ruler of the north. Ilaga herself had mentioned that Igre was someone with a great deal of curiosity. Sensing his scent, she questioned whether he belonged to the Nao family or the Ilaga family, and since he is from Ilaga's family, it seemed, would be invading their territory. However, the boy, being prepared, stated that he was there for his own reasons and declared what he intended to do next. It could be very significant because she would finally be able to satisfy her curiosity, given that he would be the first to cross the barrier and leave the forest of roots. And then she laughed, questioning whether someone as weak as him could actually accomplish it, adding that if he failed now, he would never see anyone else attempt to overcome that barrier again. Divine, because humans would always be thrown into that forest, but he would be the only person capable of passing through the barrier, so she ended up making an stay trapped in that forest forever. But he replied that even if he didn't eat him, he would still be trapped there regardless, and since he was still weak, exception, and expressed her desire to see him attempt to cross that barrier, which is why she would protect him until he reached it. Regardless of the outcome, he sent word to him that he survived and managed to escape the forest. Afterward, Sulo headed towards the waterfall downstream because he needed to go further beyond the forest. Roots, since divinity is the power of purification, which protects humans and repels negativity, and now that power was penetrating within him with an agonizing pain he had never felt before. Until, elsewhere, there was a group traveling by cart, although not exactly, because only the provisions were in the cart. The ox driver said that it was better to rest in order to travel faster, because if they encountered a demonic beast, exhausted, they would be ruined. So, the blonde had to go fetch water for them before nightfall. The moment he arrived at the river to collect water, he only saw Helmut completely wrecked on the ground and ran off as if he'd seen a ghost. When he got back to the group, he said there was a body in the close ravine, but everyone thought he was joking. The woman with the hat went with him to check it out, and sure enough, there was a body down there. But, wait, it wasn't a dead body because he was still breathing, and when he regained consciousness, he was surrounded by people. The woman says that the boy from around here went to fetch water and found him wrecked by the riverbank, and asks what his name is. Anyway, she's Astania. He could not leave Alaga's territory, or else the other beasts would hunt him down. Alaga told him that he could get out of there because someone, rank 3 mercenary, with a silver medal from the Mercenary Face Corporation, while Helmut was still amazed because they were other humans. She said they were in the rotten forest. As for Helmut, he says he only remembers his name and how to use a sword. Following that, Tanya said that she would help him, and for the time being, he would be her responsibility. Sometime later, Helmut thought about how he had almost not survived, and that it would take him a while to fully recover. At that moment, his body was in a weaker state than when he first started training, and the seed that he thought would disappear was still there. In any case, since this was the human world, they couldn't discover that he possessed that seed, and therefore, he would pretend that he had lost his memory and would try to find the owner of that pendant. But to do all that, he needed to take things one step at a time. The next day, the people were impressed because his appearance had completely changed after bathing. One person even asked if he came from a noble family. While Tanya asked if he was feeling better, the blonde man took the opportunity to ask if she had been so kind because the boy was actually very handsome, but, for saying that, he only received 2 slaps across the face. Then, she said that they would reach a town in 4 days, and that he had to endure the journey because they would take him to a doctor. Thus, everyone gathered their things to leave. In the middle of the road, the short one thought it was strange that he liked to caress had told him it was possible that someone was a human she had known a long time ago, and since so many years had passed, he surely would have already. Horse, commenting that it was a very docile creature. Until, sometime later, Helmut began to run out of breath. The other man ordered him to get into the cart. But no, he would continue like this, because he needed to improve by continuing to walk. In the city, the doctor ultimately said that there was nothing particularly wrong with him. Meanwhile, Tanya exploded, asking if he was a charlatan for giving such a diagnosis. But in any case, there was nothing wrong, no matter how much he examined him. That's why he only gave him a remedy and said that the memories would likely return naturally. Outside, he tells Tanya that he was feeling better, while she commented that his body was very firm, and that, since he knew how to use a sword, he must have trained with a master. In that case, she invites him to have a duel as a way to warm up his body, since they had nothing to do the next day. In Helmut's thoughts, Tanya was a mercenary with a medal, rank 3 silver, a person of considerable renown in that world, which is why he accepts to see just how well his body was recovering. In the arena, everyone was training, and when Tanya arrived with Helmut, everyone told her to take it easy on the boy, but they only received a few blows to the head, face, while she said that they would fight with wooden swords, and the only rule was that they would fight until one of them fell to the ground. At that moment, Helmut's body was not yet in its best shape, and he couldn't use the encore, so he only needed to confront her while redirecting the attacks. The duel died somewhere in the forest. The cunning Helmut asked if he couldn't have survived. She said that he was strong in the past, but humans age, and it began with him advancing, and her defending, sending him back. In the next confrontation, he managed to dodge to the side, but immediately, he received a kick while airborne, as his body still couldn't keep up with his movements. It felt like he was struggling underwater. While as he defended, she pressed forward, seizing an opening to throw him back, for the victory was hers. And yet, he still came around, saying that he had been very decent and had fought well, until another commented that Tanya was an incredible fighter, even among the mercenaries. Everyone began to give him pats on the back, and the one in front introduced himself as Pien, the captain of the mercenary group and a gold medalist in rank 2. He said that Helmut had passed the entrance test because, having saved him, they didn't want him wandering around without his memories, and that's why they were thinking about stay with him until then. That's also why they had been observing Helmut from a distance before arriving in the city, and furthermore, he hadn't acted like the other young men who they were trying to court his sister. Just like that, he received a mercenary contract of rank 4, and now people were already congratulating him as he asked the captain how long he would have to remain in the mercenary squad. In reality, he was completely free to leave whenever he wanted. But if he started a mission, he had to continue until it was finished. That ended up being a good thing for Helmut, who still didn't know anything about that world and would thus discover that's why none of them managed to harness it, because whenever they ventured in there, no one ever returned alive. Then they came up with the idea of throwing, are further weakened in this forest by the demonic energy, and that he alone didn't feel it because he possessed the seed of darkness. He kept insisting what allies were. In the room, the old man was saying that this wasn't a mission someone of rank 4 could participate in, but the captain told him that he trusted him because the boy would be useful, and since it was such short notice, he would only have to pay a third of the price of a rank 4. Furthermore, the Tarek mercenary squad, the Tarek mercenaries would also be on that mission. After the old man left, the captain explained that tomorrow's mission was a large-scale convoy, and that even if they were ambushed, only rank 3 seconds were to engage in combat, because the monsters were very strong. One of the men commented that if the Tarek squad tried to insult them, they should simply ignore them, as they didn't have a good reputation with them either. With the meeting adjourned, they would meet up the next morning. Meanwhile, that night, Helmut was in the training grounds, reflecting on the duel from earlier and how his body still wasn't. He was recovered, but that wasn't a problem because he would begin his training as if it were the first time. The next day, they were all together in the forest, having arrived at the cargo they were meant to escort. And that's why Old Meals was saying that the Rostro squad had to guard the rear, while the blonde guy was saying that those guys next to him must be from the Tarek squad. The guy himself came over, asking what the skinny guy was staring at, because he was so thin that he probably didn't even know how to hold a sword. In Helmut's thoughts, comparing his strength to his opponent's was the same as comparing it to asking if he had found other people there, and she just smacked him with her tail, because she had raised him all this time, and he already wanted to leave. Demonic beasts. And that human probably wasn't the leader, since he wasn't that strong, but either way, it was better to keep an eye on him. A few days later, that same maniac ended up knocking our skinny guy down, claiming it was just an accident, and on top of that, the guy next door looked like a girl. But Helmut simply ignored him and went to pick up the skinny boy to take him away. Meanwhile, the guy was furious that he had been ignored yet again, because he was actually a rank 3 who had been temporarily demoted because of an arm injury. And there was also the matter of his brother, who had warned him that if he caused trouble again, he would be expelled. That's why he decided the people there would have to help him later. In the squad, the blonde was annoyed because it had only been 3 days, and these crazy people were chasing him every day. So he grabbed the bucket of water and angrily went to find water under the bridge. Down by the river, when he went to fill his first bucket, the guys showed up behind him, calling him over for a little chat, and after roughing him up, they asked him if he had already bathed with his friend. What they really wanted was to check if he was a boy or a girl now, and that's why they had called him over there. When Helmut arrived and saw the situation, he figured that this must be the kind of person Dyden had warned him not to trust. The man ordered everyone to jump on Helmut and strip him. He readied his sword, but it was no use because Tanya arrived, punching the first guy in the face and demanding to know why the Tarek squad. After so much prodding, he revealed that the man lived in the eastern part of the forest. So, Helmut happily ran off, thinking about finding was harassing her members. The leader of the failures just said that they were having a conversation, but Tanya retorted that it had better not be happening. Another incident of them bothering his mercenaries, because the next time it wouldn't end peacefully. So, when night fell, Helmut went to training in the middle of the forest, and now his body was much better since he had focused on healing for a week. He just wasn't recovered enough to use the encore yet. Then, at dawn the next day, the captain said that there had been many demonic beast appearances in the region they were about to enter, and that is why they should be careful. People later began to speculate about the appearance of the demonic beasts, until, up front, one of the guys was complaining about having to go get water, but at that moment his head disappeared, because a demonic beast. The first one was furious that the beast had taken his companion, and he went after it, only to be kicked away, flying because that monster was actually very strong. So now the two squads prepared for combat, while Helmut and Flacucho hid under the cart. And since he still couldn't use Bis, it would be very dangerous if he tried to fight, because he felt that this monster was quite strong. And so the battle began. The rank 2 fighters went to the front, surrounding it and unleashing their swords, while the rest of another human in that area. Up ahead, there was a strange place enclosed by a wooden fence. So, what to do? He jumped over the fence and found a small house in the middle. Group took care of the weaker beasts. The fighting on the front line was intense, because the rank 2 mercenaries knew how to use again, but they were still much stronger than Helmut thought, especially since the bosses kept the leader occupied while the others dealt with the lesser monsters. However, at that moment, the monster stopped fighting and fled into the forest. Following orders, they weren't allowed to pursue it, as their mission was transportation, not subjugation. Then, the blonde guy went to ask Helmut for help because he couldn't get up, and they also offered to take care of the beasts' bodies. Beasts, because according to one of them, the skin and the seed could be sold for a high price. He came showing what a seed of darkness looked like, while the Finter asked. The blonde guy said that he had heard that those seeds dominate the minds of humans and transform them into demonic beasts, and normally, those who are born with them, they die at birth, or they are sent to the forest of roots. And then Helmut understood why Dyden had said that earlier. Because as long as if he had the seed, he would have to fight against other humans. And the reason why he had activated the Encore was to suppress the seed within him, and, for an hour, without his Encore active, he had to conceal the fact that he possessed a seed as much as possible, until the blonde went to look at the ugly face of one of the beasts. But at that very instantly, she grabbed him by the neck, and Helmut, with a simple, swift draw, cut the beast in half. And with that, he ended up feeling a strange sensation, something only a human could have built. Just then, Helmut was thrown to the ground by a man who demanded to know who he was, while Tanya herself perceived something in that unsheathing of the sword. Later that night, he was training because his Encore had finally returned, and, either way, he would now be able to recover the amount he had before in just 3 days. So he continued his sword training until he felt something strange approaching, and when he went to investigate, it was that annoying guy who had come before, saying it was dangerous to walk alone because he wouldn't have any help now, like last time, and for that, he would receive a lesson. Helmut simply asked if he had really come all the way there to do something so ridiculous, and the other man broke the bandage he had on his arm because it was already 100% healed, and threw a punch at Helmut, who stopped him with his bare hands, preventing him from getting up on his knees, because apparently he needed to learn his place. But the guy, refusing to accept this, let go of Helmut's hand and pulled out his sword, although it was no use. Nothing. Helmut simply unsheathed his sword and cut off the guy's legs. If he was left there, he would probably die. It's just that at that moment, Helmut's mind was being dominated by the seed's killing intent, and he beat his chest to control himself, realizing how long it had been since he last used Bis. Passed without using Bis. When he calmed down and went to look for him, the guy had crawled away, wondering how a nobody could use Bis, but what awaited him. Waiting ahead was not good at all. And when Helmut found him, it was that monster leader again, who ended up crushing that annoying guy. Helmut began explaining that she had told him a human lived in the east, and that he had come here wanting to leave the forest. Then the man inquired, Bis on his sword to engage in combat, and the monster ended up running away, until, from behind, the staff arrived, asking who was there, and then Helmut had to recount what happened because Bait was killed by the demonic beast. One of the leaders issued an apology, because in one way or another, he had also been in danger. But Tanya stated that apologies weren't enough, especially since Helmut had almost died even though they were aware of what that annoying guy was doing. Another person behind him only asked him to watch his words because that was his brother, but she immediately retorted that if he had supervised him properly, none of that would have occurred. Just then, old Mayes intervened, saying that it was enough, because they needed to organize themselves, and since they couldn't do anything about the dead, as compensation, Helmut would receive the payment that mercenary. They had died, and now they needed to figure out a safe way to deal with the demonic beasts, especially since 3 members of their group had already perished. After that, Helmut ended up getting a scolding from Tanya, who told him that he shouldn't wander off alone from now on, and that feeling that The feeling he sensed in her words reminded him of the way Daiden used to treat him. And so, the next day, they continued their journey through the forest, battling against the demonic beasts. And by the end of the day, the guys were completely exhausted because they had been fighting all day. As, in the current situation, the monsters, why he wanted to leave and explained that the human world wasn't the nice or peaceful place he had imagined, because humans are weak and were only targeting their squad, because Tariq's squad had barely fought at all that day. Then, that night in the wagon, old Mises was saying, Tariq was asked to help the other squadron in the rear guard, but he disagreed with that idea because he believed efficiency was more important than security. It was very simple. While the Face Squad fought the monsters, the rest would quickly abandon the forest. Nas questioned whether they had no honor in doing so, but the important thing in that place was survival, since that beast could kill them all. Therefore, it was just waiting for them to tire out before attacking, making it a simple and efficient solution. The next day, the Face Squadron was riding in the rear guard as usual, until the other squadron ran away because the demonic beasts appeared. Then, the captain realized that they had been abandoned there, while Helmut, deep in thought, believed it was time to act, and when they all rushed forward, the battle commenced. But it was still a difficult fight because there were simply too many monsters. Seeing that, Helmut could only think that those people shouldn't die there, so he asked them to keep what they were about to witness a secret. And so, using his encore ability, he jumped, cutting down everyone from all sides until no one was left standing, and when he passed by the last one, everyone was terrified, because he was incredibly strong, and Helmut only stated that his body had recovered. Then Tanya realized that what she had seen before was indeed true, and even, they have no sharp claws or teeth. However, they are more cruel and cunning, and want to dominate everything. Helmut revealed that he wasn't born in the forest, but the captain was surprised because even he couldn't manifest his power in that manner. Anyway, Helmut said that he would stay with them until they managed to get out of the forest. When they were tracking Tariq's men, it seemed they had been running through the forest all night, but Helmut had just sensed something. A battle was brewing. Battle ahead, and at their current speed, it would take them up to an hour to get there, so they headed in that direction to try and save the idiots. The other group was struggling to defeat the beasts until their boss arrived, which meant they were in deep trouble. Then, the one with the blue hair told the other that they should flee, because otherwise everyone would die. If they fled now, all the witnesses would disappear, and their reputation would be safe. And so, the two simply escaped, telling everyone to disperse, while old Me lamented his decision, because the beast, he began to attack everyone inside the cart, until Helmut arrived just in time with his sword, sending the monster flying. The captain had told him some time ago. He had told him to go to the front to assess the situation, and since his aura could also defeat that monster, except that as he slashed at the known monster, he realized that it was the strongest he had encountered since leaving the forest, which is why he couldn't lower his guard. Then the fight on both sides began, until the monster started absorbing the energy of the other dead, and now it would probably be even stronger than before, which is why he was sent there as a baby because of the seed of darkness. The man was surprised, because those born with the seed are immediately executed. Helmut needed to go all out to finish it off before the squad arrived, so the fight continued all around until the monster jumped on top of him, but he remembered that attack pattern, the same one used by the Now snake, so he simply jumped to the side, delivering a powerful blow. He slashed, and by the time the others arrived, he had already devastated everything. Luckily, old Messies was still alive inside the wagon. When he woke up, he thought he was in the afterlife, apologizing because he had been threatened by Tariq's men. But in the end, he wasn't dead yet, and the demonic beast had been defeated. Then it was time to discuss the finances, because they wanted 80% of the profits due to everything that had occurred, especially since they still had saved thousands in the end, and that's how he ended up accepting the deal, while the captain inquired about what kind of thing they were transporting. In reality, the client they were supposed to find was the great mage, Antiol, and the origin of the merchandise they were transporting was from the Lumen Temple. And as they already knew, the power of the temple was beyond people's imagination, because the group that had defeated the Demon King thousands of years ago was not what it once was before, because now they were gathering sacrifices and power in the name of protection. And most of the kingdoms had submitted to them, but they were unable to control that mage. In the midst of the conflict, the mage found an object in the temple and wanted to investigate it, but if it became known that the All-Orsisa, immediate, suggesting he might be from an important lineage, and that's why he believed the reason he was abandoned in the forest was because of that seed within him. Merchant Association had delivered that object. The association would be destroyed, since the temple was too powerful, and the association was only doing so because that magician had saved their leader in the past, which is why they owed him a debt. Then Helmut asked if the magician was really that famous, but apparently there was even more to it. There were stories about how he almost destroyed a divine barrier in the temple, and it was then that he paused to consider if a wizard like him could actually remove that seed. So, sometime later, they finally emerged from the territory of the beasts. The captain gave Helmut a pill to aid in the bison's recovery. He expressed his gratitude for saving his squad, because if it hadn't been for him, they would all be dead. Then, the next day, they finally arrived at the designated area, marked. The captain still couldn't understand why it was literally in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't a village, a road, or anything of the sort. According to old Mills, it was exactly in that place where they would transport the objects to Antiol's house. Instead of trying to explain it verbally, he decided to demonstrate by using that necklace. When he placed it in the middle of the tree, everything began to emanate energy, because it was magic, and they were traveling through space. The captain was impressed, because it was beyond comprehension. Helmut questioned whether it could be an illusion, but the temperature was dropping, as they were traversing a great distance. Up ahead, they finally spotted someone, Archmage Antiol, who was welcoming the guests from Wateragent, those who they wanted to kill into that forest, since whenever people caused problems, that would be the perfect place to get rid of them. Afterward, and that as long as he possessed it, he would be hunted, even if he left the forest, and would likely die fighting other humans. But Helmut, the Merchant Association, since everything had arrived in good order, he expressed his gratitude and inquired if anyone had died, as there were several traces of life force within what cart. The old man said that barely a third of the members had managed to arrive, as they had to fight a giant beast. Antiol, interested, he asked where the corpse was, but the old man mentioned that the body had already been processed. So, if he wanted to buy it, it was available. The magician immediately offered 150,000 marks, which surprised the group, because it was a lot of money. According to one of the men who was there, he had heard that archmages possess immense wealth. Antiol orders them only to unload the cart, since he will not need it. Looking at him, Helmut perceives that, although it is a different power than that of the shadow mage he met, he is strong. When Antiol looks at Helmut, he comments on how wizards, they can see the truth that no one else knows. Helmut warns him to remain alert. Then, Antiol uses barrier magic to isolate him from the outside world, demonstrating respect for hidden truths. He swears in the name of his title as a mage, drawing attention to the chains emanating from him, the so-called Mage's Oath, a promise that, if broken, results in the loss of a significant amount of mana. Now, he instructs the special boy to ask whatever he wishes to know. Since Helmut sees that he is not a dark wizard to be fully trusted, he decides to ask him only one question. But, without any hesitation, Antiol, he responded that he wanted to go anyway. Then, the old man took him and told him that before going to the human world, he needed to become human himself. He explained that, he asks if it has anything to do with the Seed of Shadows. In fact, that's correct, because he wants to know how to remove it. Antiol answers honestly that it is impossible, because the Seed of Shadows has a direct connection to his life force. That seed possesses the power of a demon, a power that rarely resides within infants. Those who should have died are revived by the seed itself. Therefore, that thing must live until the host's death. Helmut remains surprised, because he expected an archmage to be able to resolve it. But Antiol is just a mage, not a god, and this is the first time he has seen someone controlling its seed. Normally, the seed demands demonic energy from the host, and the more the host resists, the more their mind is devoured until, eventually, he goes crazy and transforms into something akin to demonic beasts. His case is very unique, since theoretically, he can suppress that power using mana, or both powers require talent and time to master. Therefore, the idea that he trained his bison, offering the minimum amount of demonic energy to prevent the seed from driving him insane, is quite intriguing. He mentions that even for priests, it's difficult to find traces of the seed unless they directly examine his body. Even he, an archmage, was only able to see it because it reacted to the immense amount of demonic energy present there. Currently, it is visible that he doesn't have a bright future, although he will become very strong over time, provided he can avoid the temple's attention. But inevitably, to get out of there, he would have to cross the forest barrier. But for now, he needed to forget about that, because he needed to become strong first. Otherwise, he would just, like everyone else, the seed could devour him, and consequently, his sword will destroy this world, as that is the fate of all who possess the seed. However, Helmut says that won't happen because he is human. Then Antiol laughs, explaining that just as humans dictate destiny, they can also change it. He says he will watch the boy, because if he doesn't overcome this, he will have to stop him when the day comes. After all this, Helmut ends up receiving money for the work he did with the other members, and asks if a bag found in the luggage is also his, since it was found among their belongings, but it didn't belong to any of the members. That bag contained the things he had brought with him from the forest. So Helmut thanks him, while the captain explains that he didn't return it sooner because he forgot. He also thanks Helmut, calling him the hero of the mission. The end. Excitedly talking about showing him the mercenary headquarters, but Helmut decides not to go. Tanya offers to let him continue using the squadron certificate. Well, now he has something more important to do. Helmut gathers his belongings and departs as everyone bids him farewell. The captain says that whenever he needs a squad, he just has to call them any time. Helmut then feels a pang in his heart, just like when he left Diden, and he now finds himself facing the threat of demonic beasts, and the seed continues to absorb more and more energy, just as it did in the forest. The end up dying out there, and that's why he would teach him. Back at the house, Helmut complained about the dirt, while the old man told him that it would be his bed. But only way is to become stronger to the point where not even the seed can control him. Elsewhere, someone comments that there would be no. Having accepted the mission, they couldn't have known it would be so dangerous. But what matters is that they are alive and can rebuild Tarek without anyone finding out what happened. However, they begin to hear a familiar voice. It's Captain Tanya and the other members entering through the door, and the two become worried because they survived. And when Finn glances to the side, he no longer sees anyone at the table by the window. Meanwhile, they are concerned because they should have personally eliminated that squad. Personally to that squad. One of them is sure that it is only a matter of time before their actions are discovered by the guild. So, Tarek's group continues towards oblivion, but the blue-haired rebel orders them to be followed, since they are rank 2, and their only alternative to starving is to steal. As dusk fell, Helmut sat inside a tavern, contemplating his need to find a clue about the necklace, as he'd spent the last few days just traveling through random villages. He knew he wouldn't always find good people like the ones he'd met, but at least the money he received from the captain was practically double what Diden had left him. It was then that he noticed a letter inside, and recognizing the handwriting, he knew it was certainly from Diden. Before drawing his last breaths, Diden had written a letter saying that if Helmut was reading it, it meant his own life had ended, and that Helmut could now leave no laziness would be tolerated, because they still had a lot to do, like putting on clothes for the first time in his life. Afterwards, they went to the forest, because he was going to learn what forest. He would probably have trouble adjusting to the outside world, since he had lived in the forest, and Diden's time must truly have been running out for him to be concerned. By Helmut. To get straight to the point, if you are traveling without a specific goal, you should consider going to Baden, to a place called Greta Academy, where children of Adi, children your age, attend. There, you can learn more about being human, because peasants and nobles are treated equally. And of course, you can't enroll by yourself. Then, you should find a man named Eisen Kudram and show him the sword he gave you. Eisen will know that you are his disciple, and since they swore an oath, that man will help you. Lastly, the human world can be a dangerous place, where strength doesn't solve every problem, but because you managed to overcome your difficult training, he believes that Helmut will pass this test, and that is why he asks you to be careful, young man. Seeing the trembling letters, Dairon was already almost too weak to write. Then Helmut feels grateful because his destiny is set. At that moment, the waiter arrives, bringing all the food, which he had ordered, saying that the total is 15 marks. Then he takes out a coin from the bag, which astonishes the waiter, because it is a coin worth 1,000 koz. While Helmut says he wants to sleep there and to use that to pay for everything. At that moment, one of the men, already drunk, glances over, and while Helmut was thinking about the money he had earned, he approaches the table saying that the boy is quite rich, and two others arrive asking to borrow 20,000 marks in order to. He could and could not eat in there. So, he first spoke of that organic root that, although it contained demonic energy, could be purified with water and then eaten. Helmut was left, drink, but Helmut immediately refuses. Then, the men, annoyed, are ready to fight. And if fighting is what they wanted, fighting is what they'll get. They manage to get there. Well, Helmut defeats them easily. The drunk asks him who the hell he is, but Helmet only identifies himself as a mercenary and orders him to leave the area. Then, the waiter, frightened, tells him that he must leave the city immediately, because they received a declaration of war from the Black Eagles. Black Eagles, who are bandits that dominate the underworld and kill anyone for money. Helmet realizes that he has gotten himself into a bigger situation than he thought. He had hoped for and thinks about luring the men to another place, while the waiter, still dazed, says that he should flee. Helmet instructs him to say that he went. He went to the forest and will return, so he must leave his room prepared for him. At night, in an alley, they discuss whether he will really do as he says until one of them arrives. Running off, he says he found out where it is, in the woods behind the inn. They decide to hunt Helmet to prove that the Black Eagles are more terrifying than anything else. Inside the forest, Helmet reflected on what he had learned in the squad, that there are many humans who act like beasts. And, conversely, there are humans who protect each other, and that's why humans are truly complicated. He also remembered what Darren said, that problems cannot be resolved with force alone, but at that moment, it's the only way he can resolve them. He perceived that the humans who act like demonic beasts, impressed because he didn't know there were edible plants around. After all that, he had to go fetch water, but just then, the Aga appeared and struck him in the ear. Should be treated as such, and since they all came armed, he can send them all to their graves, right? Then, afterward, Helmet started leaping from branch to branch. He is on a branch, thinking they are weaker than Tanya. In any case, he will start moving when the sun rises, so he will return to the inn to rest for a bit. Only at that moment, the seed began to react, and he fell to the ground, wondering why, since he hadn't killed any demonic beasts, but humans. The fact that this happened means that killing someone makes the seed grow. Therefore, this ends up being a huge problem because, if they discover the massacre he committed, other humans will hunt him down, and since he can't kill his opponents, he'll have to avoid them as much as possible. That's why he needs to go to the academy as soon as possible. And then, one of the ninja men reported that everyone was dead, and since that's the case, the bearded man simply tells them to continue with the plan until another person appeared, announcing their arrival and identifying them as the very same rank 2 individuals who had fled the battle, their reputations utterly ruined. The bearded man tells them that he appreciates strong people wanting to join, but that currently, they aren't allowing anyone in without meeting certain conditions. Although he doesn't doubt their abilities, things are different here because they engage in many illegal activities. So, if they do anything foolish on the job, motivated by a moral compass, it will be problematic, and that's why he needs something to prove they won't. He gives them a small task because the night before, 5 of his ear, because he was listening to that human, even though he never listened to her. But Helmet told him that this man would make him strong enough to escape them. Subordinates disappeared and, as they discovered, were killed by a single mercenary. Judging by the state of the bodies, they were killed with a single blow each. In addition to the fact that there were no traces of any weapon, the description of the man who committed the act is that he has black hair and eyes, and appears to be around 15 years old. If they complete that job, they will be eligible to join the Black Eagles. Then, the blue-haired one cuts to the chase, asking where he is. And according to reports, he was staying at the inn in a nearby village, and since it hasn't been long, he shouldn't be too far. Meanwhile, in another city, Helmet was considering to accept a mission as a way to travel without attracting attention, and upon entering, the receptionist greeted him warmly, asking what brought him in. And of course he's there to take on a mission, since he's registered with the mercenary guild, there's no issue. Then she asks what type of mission he wants, and Helmet actually says that the reward doesn't matter, he just wants one that's on the way to Baden, and since Baden is a metropolitan city, there are many people who want to go there, so it will be easy to find an escort or transport mission. Then, she shows him a noble lady's escort mission, but with one condition: the mercenary must have the appearance of the noble lady's ideal type, and that is why Helmet is perfect for this mission. After accepting the mission, he passed by the store, thinking about what the woman had said, that he needed to make a great forest, since nothing interesting would ever happen if he stayed there. So he left, while the Aga was under the impression that he would have a good life, but that good impression, and therefore, he should dress better. Fortunately, he was already halfway there thanks to his handsome face, so, in order to accept this mission, I just needed new clothes. And so, in the store, the mustachioed man enthusiastically presented a pile of garments, and Helmet calmly asked how much it all cost. And this garment costs 2,000 marks, while the quest reward is only 800. Most unfair of all, upon arriving at the guild, Even the receptionist was delighted with our friend Helmut's new appearance, saying that the clothes suited him very well. And he only answered, "I'm not. Dear, I'm Helmut." The woman barely managed to say those words because he was too handsome. At the moment, she was saying that he was perfect for that mission. A man from the Seringer house arrived to verify the mercenary who had accepted the mission, and therefore, he was already calling for Helmut. Outside, while someone remained on the lookout, the man introduced himself as Hilton, the butler of the Seringer estate, and explained that the transportation and escort duties were not so different. They weren't too different, since in an escort, you have to protect a person instead of an object, and if it proved difficult, he simply had to follow the knights, and he would receive more money upon completion of the mission. They then entered the inn where the Marquis's daughter was staying, and there they introduced another knight named Cedric. At the table, the young lady was completely smitten with a certain Lord Alea. At that moment, the butler introduced the newly. Life never came, because Helmut was sitting on the ground with his hands out in front of him, as his training was starting from that day forward. The old man thought that, hired mercenary, but the woman didn't pay him much attention and left with Lord Alea, saying that they needed to depart soon and he was going to rest. Just a bit. Simply seeing the man, Helmut already found him strange because there was something different about him. The young lady also went after Lord Alea. While Helmut wondered if Alea was also a mercenary, he learned that, no, he was just a guest of the lady, and, moreover, very well known at the Greta Academy. According to the quote, butler, the lady was going to conduct the entrance assessments for joining the academy, and since they only had 2 hours, Helmut had to prepare and take a horse from the stable. And so, after managing to stay calm on the horse, Helmut recalled that being in the stable wasn't so easy because the animal threw a tremendous tantrum. Tremendous one. Later, the lady called for Lord Alea to enter the carriage, and upon seeing this, Helmut understood that he seemed to be a mage, which explained why. It seemed strange to him from the very beginning. Although they still didn't know what kind of magic they used or why he had cast a spell on himself, inside the carriage, the lady asked if he was truly the best in his magic class, and he confirmed that he was. As she continued to express her nervousness about the exam, he very calmly said, "Everything will be fine," as she tried everything she could to get him to teach her something. But in the end, he replied that he would find someone specialized in the admission exam to help her, and added that she should rest a bit because the journey would be long. Meanwhile, in front of this forest, a mother wept, begging for her son to be returned to her, but the guard wouldn't allow it because the seed of darkness was sprouting. The boy was different because he had been born with many things in addition to the seed of darkness, and that was why he was worth teaching. Later on, after, among the masked men, the man lying in wait recounted everything that had happened, and that Helmut had accepted a mission. The problem was that their knights belonging to a noble could complicate matters, so they should try to eliminate the vagabond on their own. That was the philosophy of the Black Eagles, guarantee the death of their enemy by cutting them piece by piece, and they expected everyone to share that ideal. Then, the one with the blue hair, he said that, of course, what he had said would be put into practice, while in the escort group, the lady complained that there wasn't a better inn to spend the night. But in that region, there was only that type of inn, and it would only be for this one time. Meanwhile, in the forest, Helmut was training, thinking that his encore was much better compared to when he was in the forest, and the question was, would he be able to concentrate on his training within the Greta Academy and, more importantly, trying to find any clues about the seed. As night fell, he managed to hear a noise, and he was trying to figure out what it was, since it turned out to be a little bird controlled by the Horde Alea, who also found it strange and decided to investigate. He had seen many skilled mercenaries, but it was rare to see a young person at rank 3. Just then, the young lady knocked on the door, saying that she knew he wasn't sleeping, but in the end, the maids took the headstrong girl away. The next day, they continued their journey, and it was almost lunchtime, so, after a while, he finally collapsed on the floor, complaining of hunger. Then, the old man prepared a vegetable stew, and Helmut was captivated because they stopped the carriage near a lake to rest and eat, while the mercenaries in the back complained because the lady was getting the best treatment, the best food available, while they were eating a piece of bread and filling their bellies with water. Helmut, on the other hand, was thinking about how much he missed good food, from the small sip, until he noticed something strange about the water. It had a sweet taste. Could it be poison? Because everyone was drinking the same water, and they seemed normal, but some started to nod off to sleep. Even the butler noticed that the young lady was drowsy and talking to herself, and he also fell asleep. Not only him, but all the other employees became drowsy. Thus, everyone fell asleep, but Helmut threw out the water, because he already suspected that they were approaching, assuming everyone was unconscious. When they arrived, they found him awake. The attackers did not. They didn't understand anything, and realized that he was the mercenary from the transport mission. Helmut, who wasn't naive, called them traitors for abandoning the mission. This angered the men, who said that it didn't matter, that he would fall too, and that it was hunting time. But at that moment, the blue-haired man barely blocked an attack because Lord Alea appeared, saying that if they didn't want to die, they should lower their swords and leave. Since there was more than one sleepless intruder, the blue-haired man pointed his sword at the other, suspecting that he was a mage. But Lord Alea told him to be quiet and clean up his mess, because now he was going to take care of the child. It was delicious. A moment later, the old man explained that since he wasn't a demonic beast, he lacked sharp claws and teeth, and furthermore, Meanwhile, the bearded man told the magician that he didn't need to move because it would be a quick death, painless. But Alea replied, "A silent magician is a dead magician." In the forest, Helmut fought against the blue-haired man, thankful for the luck of that the magician hadn't fallen asleep. The man launched a powerful sword strike, believing he had won. But through the smoke, Helmut remained calm. That was only the beginning. Helmut was grateful that he had followed him there because that would be the end of him. The blue-haired man, enraged to see him use Biss, tried to attack him, but Helmut dodged, jumped over him, and brutally knocked him down. The traitor, broken on the ground, asked how a boy could use Biss. Helmut struck him on the head, saying he would let him live. The man begged to be killed, as it was better than humiliation, but Helmut told him, he said there was nothing more shameful than abandoning your comrades. The traitor fled, cackling madly, while Helmut remembered that the enemy mage still remained. Lord Alea had already defeated several others, blasting a beam of magic into the bearded man's face and smashing him against a rock before, using a binding spell to immobilize the rest. The bearded man, battered and broken, managed to escape, wondering when everything had gone so horribly wrong, until he saw Helmut walk by without a scratch. That could only mean he had defeated the blue-haired one. When Helmut reached the carriage, Alea tossed him a rope. Human body has its limitations. That's why he would teach him how to use a sword starting tomorrow. But before that, he would show him what a sword truly is. He took a belota to tie up the prisoners, who were to be taken to the city jail. It was then that Helmut recalled what Diane had told him about the place where criminals were locked up, and he thought that he shouldn't have let those vagrants escape. At that moment, Alea asked him how he hadn't. He had slept, and Helmut replied that he simply hadn't drunk from the lake. Alea then cast a spell near his head, while Helmut, he questioned, "And you, I saw you drinking too." Alea explained that she had purified the water with her magic before drinking it. Helmut, surprised, asked if he could see that energy around her body. Alea was startled, but corrected herself. "I didn't see it, I felt it, and I hadn't done anything before, because it was neither my curiosity, nor was it his business." After all that, the butler gave his thanks, saying that he was in the magician's debt. Alea responded that she had only done what she owed him, and that the mercenary had also been a great help. The butler, filled with gratitude, promised an even greater reward, but at that moment, the young lady launched herself at him. Alea, declaring that it was destiny, that he had saved her, and that she would repay him with her life, that she would do anything for him. Alea, serious, responded that the best thing she could do was to keep her mouth shut, because he was already engaged and would be married as soon as he graduated from the academy. Then the woman broke down, all at once, and began to cry, while the knights decided to set off on their journey. Sometime later, they managed to reach the city without any problems, and swung it from side to side. In that very moment, he brought it down from top to bottom, and the strike split a rock in two, because that's how humans. Upon arriving, the butler handed over the reward for the mission, 10,000 marks, as a token of gratitude for having saved him. Helmut departed, expressing his thanks to the mocking. Helmut thanked the wizard for helping him, because now it was time for him to enter the academy. Once inside the city, Helmut noticed that it was different from the towns he had visited, as it was much larger. Later, he arrived at Greta Academy, where he needed to find a man named, and he found him. Upon arriving at the desk, he told the receptionist that he was looking for that man, who was the fencing instructor. Helmut gave the name, and the woman led him to the hall. When they arrived, the woman asked him to wait a moment and used magic on the door, while Helmut thought about how curious he was to meet the human that Diden had mentioned. Inside, the man said he had never heard of Diden, and asked Helmut what he wanted there. Just by looking at him, Helmut perceived that he was not as strong as Diren, of all the swordsmen he had ever seen, was the strongest. Helmut then took out the sword and showed it to him, suggesting that he might recognize it. At first glance, it looked like a poorly crafted sword, but upon closer inspection, it was clear that it must be one of the finest, and only one person could have made it, Da de Perte. The man was surprised and asked if Da de Perte was still alive, but Helmut replied that he had recently passed away. Upon hearing this, the man put his hand to his head, saying that it had been 20 years since Da de Perte disappeared, and that he had sworn to reward Dairen for saving his life. Survive. That's called ki. Just as beasts possess demonic energy, humans have an invisible source of power they can use. Although the seed of, therefore, because Helmut was holding that sword, it meant that he was the last apprentice trained by Dairen, and that's why. He asked why he was there, and the truth was simple. He had come to enroll in Greta Academy. It was then that he understood why Daiden had sent him here. Perhaps he needed a guardian. Judging by his current appearance, Helmut must have been around 14 years old. Let's assume he was 15, and taking the exam as a transfer student. But if he revealed that he was an apprentice of a legendary swordsman, he would be transferred immediately. Helmut then realized something. Daiden was in the forest of roots, but as far as the outside world was concerned, he had disappeared and no one knew about him. Someone must have sent him there and hidden him, and if someone discovered that his apprentice was in the human world, he wouldn't be able to get rid of the seed of darkness and would be sent back. That's why Daiden said he couldn't reveal everything, and that if anyone found out he was an apprentice, Helmut could die. He would talk about it when the time was right. He agreed, saying Helmut could ask for whatever he needed, and that he would take care of the documents for his transfer test. He also wanted to evaluate Helmut's skill level. They arrived at the underground training room, where he took a wooden sword. If Helmut managed to cut down a tree made of white birch, the most durable wood, it would be really impressive. This creature didn't seem ordinary because it was already using times bis asterisk. He readied himself and cut the tree in half. If he maintained that level, his future Helmut has distinct properties, but it's still a similar power. Helmut got excited and wanted to learn, but he only received a flick on the forehead because his body wasn't ready yet. Was more than assured. All that remained was to pass the theory exam, but Helmut didn't even understand what a theory exam was. That's where the disappointment began. It was lousy, really lousy. Not even a 5-year-old would get a grade like that. But with only 10 days left until the exam, improvement was crucial. Eisen, being as a member of the academy, he couldn't tutor any candidates, putting them in a complicated situation. Helmut remembered that the magician Alea was famous for being one of the academy's elite. According to Eisen, Alea had enrolled with the highest grade in her class, and Helmut decided to ask her for help while Eisen didn't understand anything that was happening in the room. Helmut went to ask Alea to be his tutor, but Alea flatly refused, saying that she wouldn't agree to tutor a clumsy swordsman and ordered him to study on his own. Helmut insisted, saying that he needed to pass, that he had been told she was the best, and that he wasn't asking for free help, but he would pay for it. Alea laughed and asked how much money a mercenary even had. Helmut, not really understanding money, simply asked how much she wanted. Alea responded that she would accept 100,000 marks, paid in cash, with no installments. Helmut just said okay, and prepared to start the next day. Alea was surprised that he had accepted, given that it was a lot times of money. They finally agreed to meet at the location the next day, so Helmut prepared. Alea told him to wait there and that she would return. Luckily, he didn't try to attack them. She came back, and they went to study in the library. While Helmut, he wasn't ready yet. Therefore, the most important thing was for him to understand the sword, even if it proved difficult and distressing. He had to keep going, and not concentrated. Alea thought he was more problematic than she had initially thought, because his learning ability was unusual. That's why she asked if Helmut hadn't. He had lived his entire life in a forest. Helmut had realized early on that Alea was not a normal person, so he had to be careful. He asked why she was asking that question. It was because her focus and memory were exceptional. Although she lacked basic knowledge of society, her answers had been the worst possible. Being taught by the academy's best student, she had to pass at all costs, because if she didn't, it would stain his honor. Still at night, they were in the library. If a classmate steals something of yours, what would you do? Alea asked. Helmut replied, I would steal it back. Alea continued explaining until Helmut understood that humans were truly complicated. Thus, after 2 weeks of studying, the library was full of girls crying over Lord Alea, while rumors circulated that he was tutoring a particular student. When Helmut arrived, they asked him if he had done well on the test. In practice, there would be no problems. He left, wishing them good luck on the upcoming exams, and expressing his gratitude because only the practical exam was left. Now they were in the fencing arts department, in the waiting room, which was full of people conversing and awaiting their turn. A young man approached Helmut, introducing himself as the second son of the Rugal family and inquiring about his name. Helmut asked the blonde why he was speaking to him. Give up, because the sword would compensate for his effort. Days later, Helmut was throwing a tantrum because the old man kept criticizing his stance, but in any case, he said that he was simply trying to make friends. Helmut told him that his name was Helmut. The blonde then asked for his last name to determine which family he belonged to. Helmut responded, she had no family, even though she wore a necklace with the name Margaret Irene. The blonde man frowned, thinking that she must be a commoner then. Everyone began to make fun of her, until a knight arrived and told the young people to lower their voices, because in 5 minutes they would explain how the exam would work. Before he left, the blonde man warned Helmut that he should bow his head to people of a higher class, but Helmut remained calm and didn't react. They explained that the exam would be in a group and divided into 2 stages. Helmut felt that everyone was staring at him, because the place was so different from the root forest. They could be monsters or humans, each in their own part of the pyramid. Being strong wasn't enough. Family mattered too. The instructor called the last cluster. The first test involved cutting a black wooden log with a wooden sword, within a maximum time of 5 minutes. Helmut thought it would be very easy. He used his key and split the log in half with a single strike. The supervisor was amazed, as he had to strike it multiple times to achieve the same result. Upon returning to the room, the blonde tried to bother him again, but it was time to explain the next stage, an 8-minute duel observed by the instructors. Opponents would be randomly assigned. Winning wasn't the objective, they had to demonstrate their skills. The blonde protested. He observed him. The more he noticed that he was a strange boy with surreal growth. Although the seed of darkness influenced humans and, unfair, whoever catches the commoner will pass immediately. Helmut was furious, nearly coming to blows, until the instructor called out the numbers. 29, Helmut, and Andre. In the arena, the 2 candidates stood facing each other. The instructor asked Eisen if that was his candidate, remarking that he must be very talented. The duel would last 8 minutes, split into 2 rounds of 4 minutes each, and the objective was to demonstrate skills. Helmut's opponent assumed that, being a commoner, he would receive a beating. The instructor was surprised to see that number 8 had been defeated. The instructors were impressed by Helmut's ability. Helmut, a vast difference compared to the others. Eisen advised him to teach his opponent swordsmanship instead of simply defeating him, setting aside considerations of status and family. During the duel, their swords clashed. Helmut corrected all of his opponent's mistakes, just as Dairen had done for him. For Eisen, it was like watching Dairen save him once again. After a week in Baden, Helmut went to the mercenary guild. The receptionist asked if he wanted to place an order, but actually, in reality, he came only to take on a mission. He had previously thought that Helmut, the novel's heartthrob, was from a renowned family. When choosing the type of order, he remembered Eisen's reaction when he mentioned paying 100,000 marks to Alea to teach him, and that's how he started learning about finances. In the guild, he wanted an order that he could complete before the following month with a high reward. Then the receptionist found one with a rather unusual location. In that child, the priests came to pray and then cast the child into the root, a place of exile where no one managed to survive, not even the most, made them act violently. Contrary to all of that, this child was cunning and didn't give up easily. Then, the old man hit him a few times with, at Greta Academy. The brochure contained the story of a ghost that appeared in the academy and, according to these accounts, emerged at night, scaring the staff. Therefore, the order was to identify and eliminate that ghost. As he walked through the academy, the green-haired boy called him pupil of Alea, because it was the first time that Alea, the idol of the magic department, had dated someone, and their relationship became a hot topic of gossip. The boy claimed to be a slightly different kind of mage and began summoning some kind of crazy spirit that flew towards Helmut. Helmut punched it, passing right through the poor guy, who emerged with a pout, while the other boy laughed because it was a spirit of light. The spirit doesn't hurt anyone, and even if it could, it wouldn't be physically blocked because spirits don't have physical bodies. Only certain mages can control them. The green-haired boy was one of those mages. He is called Sion. The only elemental mage at Greta Academy. Helmut simply said, "Okay, nice to meet you," and continued walking, saying he was in the middle of fulfilling a request. Since it was a request within the academy, Cian asked if it concerned the academy's ghost. He knew about it because he was interested in the rumor and asked if Helmut wanted help with it. In the end, the two of them were in the academy at night, using poor Rotten as a light source. They walked, sword in hand. He asked him if he understood the difference. Since he didn't understand anything, he told him he would be skipping dinner. At that moment, Helmut, through the corridors, Helmut saying that, except for those summoned with black magic, it wasn't that dangerous. Helmut was in the lead, and suggested splitting up too. Walking forward, Helmut was about to draw his sword when Alea appeared, asking what they were doing. They explained everything about the guild's request. Regarding the ghost, Alea was also there because she had received a request as well. Cian perked up, wanting to hunt the ghost together with the three of them. Together, they used illusion magic to display the entire structure of the academy. Alea pointed out that all the places where the ghost had appeared had something in common: the fencing department. It couldn't have been a magician who did it because the timing and incantations didn't match up, Helmut said. That ghosts couldn't be harmed by physical attacks, according to what Isan had told him previously. Now, Helmut was finally having a bada, civilized conversation, a welcome change since Haga always reprimanded him before, or Darren scolded him. The three possessed different areas of expertise, but together, they gradually found answers. Alea instructed Helmut to try using the sword imbued with B on the ghost, if they encountered it. After some time, Cian went to rest. Helmut asked Alea where he could find a spirit. Since Alea was an elemental mage, she wasn't able to locate spirits. Then someone noticed something and gave chase to a spirit, and the two followed Cian, while Helmut questioned if she had known it was a spirit from the start. It was exactly that, and he began to understand that the amount of damage was different, and that the speed and the areas he could reach were also different, even though it was the same. Using Cian to search was the only way to locate it. Alea used tracking magic, displaying Cian's footprints on the ground, which led exactly to the fencing department's training grounds. Alea explained that spirits seek quiet places to hide and establish themselves. Its base. Helmut recalled Isan's training camp, a nearby place that was uncrowded and quiet. They went inside, and Alea began to sense something, confirming that it was the correct location. Alea was not pleased that there was only one elemental mage in the academy, so he wanted to capture the spirit in order to study it. He used a silencing magic, erasing his presence, and asked Helmut to help prepare a trap for the spirit. Finally, the academy's ghost appeared. Alea attempted to attack it, but he had used a sealing spell that prevented him from moving well, so Helmut needed to weaken the monster. He drew his sword with vigor and cut the monster in two, but it furiously returned. At that moment, Cian arrived, asking what they were doing. Because it was a shadow spirit, and being self-aware, it required a delicate approach. Alea asked how to capture an out-of-control spirit. While Cian was worried because Alea wanted to capture the creature and perform experiments on it, Cian explained that he would not cooperate with Alea's research, because he wanted to carry out very dangerous experiments. The plan was for Alea to maintain the seal, while Helmut distracted the spirit to calm it. Cian, motion. The old man said that imitating the external appearance wasn't enough. He had to understand how his entire body connected with the mind of the sword, having everything. He conjured several magic circles together with Alea for the sealing, but the spirit attacked. Helmut cut it down, but the spirit escaped, and Helmut ran after it. The sword aimed at his face, nearly hitting him. But Cian used his magic and turned the spirit into a miniature head with a pout. The next day, they took this to the mercenary guild to show that they had completed the mission. The conversationalist boasted about being the only elemental mage there. The receptionist said that they should return in a few days to ensure that the ghost didn't reappear. Helmut began to form his first friendships at the academy. While Alea avoided the handshake, Helmut went with Isan because his dormitory was on the 3rd floor, Unit 301, since all the students lived in dormitories. He went to see what it was like and showed the place to the man on the ground floor, who got scared. In that dormitory, someone tired was complaining that he would never make friends, only to end up entangled with 2 troublemakers, all because of a damn crow that walked up the stairs. Upon opening the door to the 3rd floor, Alea was standing there. She turned out to be a woman. Helmut wondered if that was the magic he had been sensing around him. Afterward, they went to an alley where the face and Sida, 2 troublemakers, were having an altercation with the guards. Something appeared and berated them for being idiots and failing to kill a child. The one with blue hair tried to attack, but his head was instantly blown off. The bearded man asked who the being was. The being responded that they had tarnished the name of the Black Hawks and that it had questions for, under control, and that was why he had to dedicate his heart and soul to each movement. Then Helmut perked up and began to swing his sword until he went to the terrified guards. Returning to Alea, he found she was furious and did not want to meet Helmut. As he turned the key, Helmut saw a new room and thought, which was simpler than the Kudrow mansion, a veritable paradise compared to the forest. Since leaving the forest, he had allied himself with and assisted the mercenaries, and he was now enrolling at Greta Academy, focusing intently on becoming stronger. At that moment, Helmut attempted to draw his sword, only to realize he had forgotten it. Alea was behind him. Helmut walked in, and his head nearly exploded with frustration. Alea explained that she had also been assigned to that room, room 301, and pointed out that there were 2 beds. Helmut grabbed his cape and stormed off to the principal's office to complain, while Alea warned him not to touch anything until she returned, or there would be trouble. Lee Wes, the director of Greta Academy, was calmly enjoying her coffee. Alea burst in, screaming and demanding to know how she could allow this to happen, allowing another student to share her room, especially as the head of the magic department was required to have its own room. The director, remaining calm, apologized, explaining that the dormitories were under renovation, resulting in fewer available rooms. Alea needed a private room to safeguard her identity as a woman. The director suggested that being cautious would suffice, since her archmage-level magic would likely go unnoticed by the fencing department. The only solution was to assign a friend of Alea's as her roommate until the following semester. Alea was shocked to find out it was Helmut. The director reminded her that she had only tutored Helmut because he paid her. He recalled when he first met Helmut, riverside, thinking about resting, even though it was boring. At that moment, the old man came up from behind, saying that he had grown quite a bit in that short time. During the mission, they fought side by side and became somewhat friendly. The director then commented that it was his duty to foster friendships. If Alea cooperated, this semester, he would have his own room. He reflected that it was a close call. Even though Helmut seemed like a good person, Alea asked with blushing cheeks whether Helmut really wanted to share a room. He didn't have a choice. He had always had a single room because he was the head, but this semester, he was required to share it with Helmut. He didn't like the idea very much, and asked if Helmut wanted to live in the city and have him transport him every day using magic, which the director would not approve of. Alea thought that living there would be difficult, but in the end, she decided to stay with Helmut, as it was better than rooming with the others in the department. Alea felt uncomfortable, thinking that she shouldn't have helped him on the exam. Helmut took his luggage and left, wondering if Alea had decided how to divide the room. Upon entering, he showed him the curtain that divided their spaces. Everything on the other side belonged to Alea, and she had placed an alarm spell on the curtain to keep Helmut away. That's why he started talking, saying, "Don't make noise, don't create any smells, keep the bathroom clean, and bringing another person here is also forbidden. If you need something, just call from the other side of the curtain." But as Alea returned to her half of the room, Helmut turned around and said that he hoped the two of them, they would get along well during this time. Afterwards, they were taking a tour of the academy. One group was saying that it was true that a commoner had been approved to transfer into the period of time. Then Helmut inquired about the old man's debt to her. Actually, that human desired to reside there, and she granted him special permission to do so. Transfer exam, and that Professor Eisen was his guardian. That's why Sabat said that he would take care of him personally, since commoners don't. They could be compared to a nobleman. Since there was a fencing class scheduled for tomorrow, they planned to teach that cake fryer a lesson. Helmut finally changed clothes, thinking they were comfortable, and decided to head to the training room. On the way, he ran into the green-haired boy, our friend Sion, who asked, looking frightened, if Helmut was in room 301. Helmut, with his usual expressionless face, asked if there was a problem. Sion didn't understand, since Alea always had a single room because he was the head of the magic department, and he couldn't comprehend why he had agreed to share. Sion commented that it was difficult to live with someone so stressed, and asked if they were having their first fencing class today. He told Helmut that he should avoid getting involved with the dog, the department's madman. Helmut asked if the department raised dogs, but that was just a nickname for a second-year student named Azuka. Last year, every student who messed with him got a beating. One even left the academy after losing an ear. That's why nobody messes with him. And because he was so talented, the academy only gave him a suspension. Sion told Helmut to pay attention in class, and mentioned that he would be staying in room 303. So, if Alea wanted to kill Helmut, she just had to show up there. Afterwards, Helmut went to the department's fencing field. He even joked that she didn't like living with anyone and had allowed him to stay without a fight. However, she was the forest's owner, and she would fight anyone who bothered her, regardless of who they were. The professor called the second-year students to form 4 lines and asked how they had spent their vacation. As it was the first class of the semester and it was basic training, he commented, "I bet some of you 6 spent the holidays in your mother's lap. You can run 20 laps. To the field, now." Helmut ran calmly, wondering if 20 laps were enough to warm up, while the green-haired student was annoyed to be next to a commoner. He had the brilliant idea to introduce Helmut to the academy floor by making him fall. He attempted a first kick, but nothing happened. He didn't even understand if he had landed it. He tried again until Helmut got tired and punched him, leaving his face planted on the ground, while Helmut continued running, and the other students swore revenge. After the 20 laps, the students were exhausted on the ground. Another student went to complain to Helmut, accusing him of, he brought him down, even though he was the one who started it all. He was furious, saying that he was protected within the academy, but outside of it, no one could protect him because he didn't recognize his place. Only this madman didn't realize just how strong Helmut had become at this point in the story. The other blonde boy arrived and told Aaron to stop wasting his energy because his reckoning would come eventually. Helmut thought that humans, although weak, were proud of their status, something that they hadn't even earned for themselves. He wondered if he should teach those useless nobles a lesson. Although, on second thought, perhaps not against everyone, as she had to be careful not to be attacked by that snake while fighting. Just then, someone arrived from above, asking if they were talking about him. Aaron asked who it was, but he didn't recognize the students below either. I had heard about the commoner, and she became angry, calling him impudent and declaring that she had no obligation to tolerate commoners. The brave one with blue hair. He provoked them while his friends shouted, "Let go of me, let me go, or I'm going to do something." He turned and said he would see how long those bastards would last. Helmut. He recalled what Sean had said. Don't get involved with the department's crazy dog, Azuka, who was currently causing trouble right in front of him. Then, the teacher shouted that when their names were called, they were to take a wooden sword. He called Asuka first and questioned her about her tardiness. Azuka explained that she had been in a meeting with Professor Patricia, but since the professor was on break, it wasn't a valid excuse, so she would have to run 30 laps around the field. Helmut thought Azuka must have a terrible reputation. The professor instructed them to take their swords and begin training, and to take it seriously. Helmut grabbed he took the sword and swung it forcefully, rotating it in every possible way. He reflected on what the professor had said, about how the first class wouldn't be anything special. Since it was so simple, he wondered if it would become more difficult later. Just then, Azuka called out to him, asking if he wasn't going to thank her for stopping the fight. Helmut hadn't asked for help, so Azuka shook his hand, saying that she was also a commoner and hoped they could get along. Helmut noticed an energy in her hand, but that snake was Nao, who lived in the southern region of the forest. She desired that. Ignored it. Azuka said that she didn't like it when people constantly asked for help and walked away, talking to herself. Helmut, who had barely said a word, thought that starting fights gave a good impression. Alea commented that it wasn't like that at all. She explained that for idiots who believe status is everything, the issue can be resolved by demonstrating your level of strength. Helmut recalled that Sion had said fighting on the first day was bad, but that it depended on the fight. Provoking someone to attack you gives a bad impression, but the opposite would be good, so the right thing to do was to wait for the dueling class. Helmut wondered if, as the best student, he could attack without restraint. He was thinking about that crazy student in his class and the meeting with the nobles. The blonde had said it was a good thing. Now Helmut had another commoner friend, but Azuka would soon become his obedient dog. Azuka hit the person behind him on the back of the head, telling him he was too excited, and asked if he wasn't going to do something to obey now. He stated that at Greta Academy, there is no discrimination based on status when it comes to learning opportunities. Over time, there emerged the belief that nobles should harass commoners, although not overtly, it always happened covertly. They call Azuka the dog, crazy because of his menacing presence, which made the nobles stare without acting. The other commented that he lived up to the nickname, but after the suspension he had to live online. If he did anything else foolish, he would be suspended again. That's why he went crazy, ordering Helmut to strike him so that this puppy, great geniuses, knights, or incredible magicians, a place where criminals were thrown using divine magic, and if someone managed to escape with human who lived there, and if the fairy became exhausted from fighting, the snake could come and finish them both off, as she wasn't sure how strong he was, would obey, or his life would be ruined. Was it clear who the coward in the academy was? Azuka told his friends that even he was afraid of the kennel. But someone showed up and gave them each 2 knocks on the head, asking if they were there to become delinquents. It was Professor Patricia. Azuka accused a homeless student of starting everything, but she hit him again, telling him that he should stop using violence to solve everything. Sabat was also mistaken. He needed to choose his opponents carefully based on their abilities. It was almost time for the next class. The students walked along as Azuka went with her. If he kept acting like that, he would get into trouble again. Patricia couldn't always protect him, and he shouldn't waste this opportunity on foolishness. She mentioned that another commoner had passed the first class without any problems, so Azuka needed to be nice to him. He remembered that it was our goth, Helmut, who had said no. He didn't want to ally himself with anyone, and was doing very well on his own. However, everyone was angry because the next class was about to begin. The teacher announced that a student had not yet arrived. Someone mentioned that it was Helmut. She sent someone to look for him, and he eventually arrived. The teacher asked him the reason for his lateness. Helmut was unaware that the location had been changed. The nobles laughed at him, but he responded, "I did not receive the notification. My apologies." The teacher did nothing, and the class commenced. It was the basic course for stamina training, a crucial determining factor for swordsmen. Each student received an almond to balance on. Old, demonic beasts expose their energy, while humans naturally conceal it. And now herself didn't like that human, because he had the tip of their sword without letting it fall. Whoever managed to do so for 30 minutes would be exempt. And hello everyone, did you enjoy the story? I absolutely loved it. If you want to see the next installment, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. We'll see you in the next story. Destroyed that horrible region that she had built. Then Helmut wondered what horrible region that was. Elaga grabbed him and ran through the jungle, arriving at a human farm, a place where humans toiled under the whips of other humans. That other group consisted of females, the women, human, something he had never seen before. They entered a cabin to be served as dinner to the great serpent because it loved to eat human women for their soft flesh, while the men worked for the rest of their lives. That's why that place was a human farm. And that bald man who looked be causing problems. In fact, everyone there was bald. It must have been some kind of requirement, but he was the only one wearing a cape and was, more or less, the leader of the place, because he was good at finding other humans who had been thrown into the forest. If Gelmot had been unlucky, he could have been one of them. Just as they were both leaving, a voice appeared, saying, oh my, who do we have here?" And it was none other than Nao the Snake, the owner of the human farm, of humans. Just feeling the pressure from those two alone was enough to make Helmut crouch down low, while Nao mentioned that he used to enjoy eating humans in his youth. Their sins would be forgiven. But one day, a baby was born with the seed of darkness. His mere existence was already a sin, so he was abandoned in the luff. But Hage simply says no, thank you, because she doesn't eat men either. She actually eats those with soft flesh. Sensing the scent in the air, she immediately asks, "Helmut, what is his relationship with Darien?" Who, for those who didn't know, was the name of the old Darien. He simply swipes at the snake with his paw, because he was bringing that dirty face too close, while she said that she had smelled that wretch's scent, and because only a few years had passed since then, since he came and destroyed their farm. And the boy warned that the child had stolen the old man's clothes, and if Nao dared to touch a single hair on his head, she would be shattered into pieces. In response, Nao simply ordered him to leave her territory. Not long after, Helmut fainted, and the boy picked him up and brought him back, telling him to be careful from now on. That's why he had to stay close to that old man, because there was no knowing what that snake could do. But then Helmut simply stopped and asked if he could become as strong as her and the old man. The fairy responded that it was a level that most humans never reach, even with a lifetime of effort, and therefore it wouldn't be easy. If he wanted to leave that forest, he had to do his best to become stronger. Thus, as the old man approached, the fairy said goodbye and departed while the man called for him to return to the cabin. By nightfall, Helmut was dying from the pain. It felt like he had a hole in his stomach, because earlier, the old man, middle of the forest. Days later, hunger and cold struck the child, except that, inside his body, something like a seed grew in his heart, and an Ephrodips had ordered him to eat something before going to sleep, and it was nothing other than poisonous grass. He had to eat it without complaint because that would help suppress his power from the seed. Then he continued to complain about the pain, thinking he was going to die right there and then, while the old man was at the summit of one of the mountains, contemplating the past 4 or 5 years. The next day, Helmut relentlessly swung his sword until he turned to Darien and said that he had felt his body lighter in recent days. That's why he wanted to know if it was because of the poisonous grass, or perhaps it was an effect of the soil. Demonic. Since the pain had stopped in recent weeks, it seemed that the time had finally come. The old man picked up a piece of wood and began to talk about Ki, the power that could not be seen. He hadn't taught him about it before because his body wasn't even at a basic level yet, but now he was ready to accept the. From that moment on, he would learn the BIS training method. The old man lifted the piece of wood, exhaling energy, and told him to feel that energy in the atmosphere until he could control it and incorporate it into his sword. This was how he had to proceed from now on. Thus, Helmut took his sword, while the old man instructed him to breathe deeply while fighting, because he needed to absorb the energy of nature. He had to think simply and move with composure, and if he lost the BIS, his body would be the first thing to break. Thus began the fight between the energy surged, filling the boy's body. 10 days passed, and the boy was still alive, until a demonic panther appeared and took him away. 2. While Helmut grumbled about how fast the old man moved, then it clicked. Breathe, breathe, and move forward, he thought, as the old man defended all the movements, and he instructed him to use his senses and absorb more energy so that they would continue training from now on. Therefore, even if it took time, Helmut had to show his determination. In each clash of swords, the old man ordered him not to lose his rhythm and to maintain control, until 4 years later, Helmut managed to cut down a tree with just a wooden sword, while the old man commented that he was doing very well after 4 years. Then he ordered him to show the encore, but Helmut responded that he didn't want to because the last time he showed it, Darien refused to fight, saying that there was nothing there. Still, he ended up gathering his ki through the sword, while the old man thought that he was showing incredible growth, because in addition to the seed of darkness, he was very talented, which is why he was certain that this boy would turn the world upside down, for better or for worse. So, it seemed that the time had finally arrived. It was time to leave that forest. However, Helmut said that he wasn't strong enough yet. Nevertheless, if the seed grew more than it should, he wouldn't be able to break through the divine barrier, so it had to be now. The old man explained that the human world was beyond the south of the forest of roots, and to get there, he had to pass through the divine barrier. In theory, he could pass through it and reach the human world.